And since you have camera now, Natalie, why don't we start with you?
Sure.
So everyone, this is Natalie. She has an interesting investment strategy. I haven't actually had a chance to meet you yet, but I think we live pretty close to each other. Do you live in Rockland?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm in Cumberland, so we're
Oh, no
practically
way.
neighbors. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I come from Cumberland. My parents live there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm 10 minutes from Rockland. So,
Sweet.
so Natalie Cloutier has an interesting investing strategy. Natalie, if you could just tell all of our attendees, what do you do as a job right now? And what is your real estate investing strategy? And within your real estate investing strategy, what is the role that you take on there?
Yeah, sure. So right now I work for the government, kind of a boring but cushy government job. But I used to be a full-time custom home designer. I just sold out for the cushiness of the government job. But yeah, so our strategy is different. We do new build. So we build like multifamily homes from the ground up. We rent them out. And yeah, we started when we were 21-ish. Yeah. What else did you ask? Sorry.
And what is your role within that strategy? So you do
Oh,
new builds, build from the ground up, and then rent them out, right? And what's
exactly.
your role there?
So both my husband and I were a husband and wife team. My husband was able to quit his job at 25, so he's been full-time building, managing the constructions. I help manage. I also do the designs. I do all the floor plans because I studied architecture, and I manage the rental properties, the rental management side as well.
Okay, very nice, excellent. Ian, we'll go to you next if you're ready. Ian Poulin, we have all these French sounding names.
I was say, so we got French names in here and some names
exactly.
Yeah,
so tell us a little bit about what you do for a job, the old job, and what do you do as a real estate investing strategy, and what's your role within that?
So my full-time job is as a business manager or finance manager for Volkswagen. So that's here at the dealership in St. Catharines. I live in the Falls, work in St. Catharines, and invest a bunch in Welland, so I'm all around Niagara. But full-time job, hours vary. It's not like a 9 to 5 only. Hours are sometimes morning shifts, night shifts, sometimes full-hour days. And then in terms of real estate investing, the main strategy is duplex conversions, triplex, single-family stuff in that segment. And then eventually, I'm sure it moves towards larger multis. But basically, we're converting single-family homes into 2 units or so.
Okay. So single family home conversions, duplexes and triplexes, and that's in the Niagara region that you focus?
Pretty much exclusively, yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have Mitt and Pierre. Both of these guys are partners in Galleon CPA. So they're both professional accountants. So that's what they do for a full-time job. They work together and they invest together, which is why I think you guys can jointly introduce yourselves and what it is you do for a job, which I kind of spoiled. And also, what is your real estate investing strategy or strategies and your roles within them?
Yep, sounds good. Yeah, like Luke mentioned, Min and I have a accounting firm together. I'm one of the partners. So day to day, as our job / being involved in our business is very involved with working with real estate investors and providing them tax consulting, tax planning, tax structuring, as well as just overall working with different types of business owners and helping them with financial statement audits, financing, things like that. Anything that a traditional public accounting firm would do. In terms of where we invest, primarily it's in Southwestern Ontario, and Mint, I'll pass it to you to talk a little bit more about our portfolio.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess like most people, we started off, I think Pierce started off with a condo. I started off with the duplex that actually he partnered with me on. And then now we've sort of transitioned to the large multifamily buildings. So we do that in conjunction with Jeff Weibo and Matt McKeever. So we're at about 100 or so units right now, and we're closing another 100 in the next quarter. And then outside of that, we do some flips as well. And we've been fortunate enough to buy the wholesale deals off of Luke and his team as well to be able to do that. Specifically, I guess our roles within it, I would say my job predominantly is involved with a lot of the financing and running some of the numbers. And then Pearson, you can talk about what you do.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit more hands-on dealing with some of the contractors, picking it out and designing some of the flips and being more on site for a lot of the projects.
Yeah, like if I designed anything, like we would always lose money.
All right, awesome. Okay, so it sounds like we have a great panel. We have a mix as well because we have Natalie over from the Ottawa area. We have Ian from Niagara region. I know Mid and Pierre Centre, you guys are in the GTA and invest a little bit London and all over southwestern Ontario as well. So we have a mix of areas, a mix of expertise, multifamily, new builds, duplex and triplex conversions. Myself, I run Bliss Realty and Cash House Buyer. We're a wholesaling company based out of Toronto, but I live in Ottawa, and we are in the Greater Toronto area, Ottawa, Montreal, and Vancouver, our markets. Toronto's been our core market for a long time, and we're growing out from there. And we are on track to buy about 250 houses this year. So that's kind of our wholesale volume, which is, for those who don't know wholesaling, we buy properties usually at a discount from sellers who are looking for an easier transaction, usually rundown properties. And then we assign the contract to other investors who are looking for a discounted property. So we're buying them below market value, and then we're assigning the contract for still below market value, but we build in a slightly higher price there so we can make our assignment fee. And that's how we do the business. We have about 30 people in the business working full-time. So I am full-time in real estate, as you can tell from that, but I'll hopefully be, if it's okay with you guys, I'll be jumping in and seeing where I can add some advice as well. I do see a lot of the questions. We do have some questions on working while investing, on working a job while investing, but we do also have a lot of questions that are just general real estate investing. In addition to the wholesaling, my wife and I own several Airbnbs and a bunch of rental properties, several duplex conversions, triplexes, things like that. A lot in Ottawa, but all over kind of Southern Ontario. So we're going to get into one of the first questions we have from people submitting questions before, when they were signing up for the webinar. So first one I liked is, how did you decide on your real estate investing strategy? And I think this is for all of the panelists. So if you guys, does anyone want to go first?
Happy to spearhead it. So I decided on my real estate investing strategy, sort of like it chose me in a certain way. So the first property that I ever purchased was just a single family home. And a lot of people might be familiar with house hacking or not, but basically that's the idea of you buy a duplex and you rent out one side and you live in the other. I took it a little more extreme. So I lived in one of the bedrooms and then I rented out some of the other bedrooms and just made it work so that the rent that I had coming in from the bedrooms paid for my own house. Now, I knew that with my job, I could afford to live on my own type of thing, but single dude, I didn't need a lot of space, didn't need much. So having a 3-bedroom house, there was a lot of excess capacity there. So I rented those out. It paid for itself. And then I put in like a basement apartment type of thing, just like not like a full legal suite or anything that way, but just like extra space and extra room for somebody else to rent. And then I had, as a result of purchasing that property, from that realtor, connected with somebody else who, it's a long story, but I'll keep it short for everybody. I was selling a stove, an extra oven that I had, and then I talked to this lady who wanted to buy the oven, and I asked her, just like you talk to everybody about real estate, if she knew anybody who was selling or looking to sell, and sure enough, she had a friend who was, and so we work full-time jobs here. I couldn't exactly hop to it and go right away to see the place, but it was a Thursday and I had Fridays off, and the next Friday I was there at the lady's house, and it was in pretty rough shape. There was dog poop in the basement, holes in the ceiling, stuff falling apart everywhere. And it was time that they just ultimately wanted to sell. They held the house for several years and just eventually wanted to get rid of it. And so I worked on that deal for a few months, just trying to tie it up and put it together. And at that time, I came to know, some of you might know Michael Walk, and I met up with him in Welland. He was just starting in a duplex conversion as well. And I just volunteered my time, said, hey, I'll come help you with demo and do some work there, figure out the strategy. And I wasn't certain what I could do with the property that I was about to buy, but I knew that it made sense and I ran my numbers a lot. And so to keep this long story short, ultimately I decided to do a duplex strategy with that one. And that's the first duplex I did. And then since then, I've done over a dozen for myself or clients too.
Okay, awesome. What about you, Natalie? How did you come across your strategy and how did you decide on that?
Yeah, I actually kind of fell into it. It wasn't something like we were never investors at heart, I guess. We just kind of learned it on the fly. But we had initially bought a condo right when we graduated from college. So we were like 19 or 20, something like that. And lived in it for 2 months until we realized we hate condos. We are not condo people. My husband wanted the garage. I wanted at least a little yard space. So we tried to sell the condo. The condo wouldn't sell. We ended up putting it for rent because it was the only way that we could kind of get rid of it in a way. And before that, though, my parents told me, because I wanted to have a house and we didn't have any money. Like we just graduated, we were young. We didn't have any debt either, but we didn't have any money. So my parents kind of sat me down and they told me about this loan that they used to do 20 some years ago, where it's basically you can build a house with instead of having 20% down, you can replace that 20% down with your labor. So if you get in there and do a lot of the work yourself, you can save money and just kind of replace it with your down payment. So they told me about that. My parents built 4 houses in 4 years before they had me and my sister. So, I mean, it was a long time ago and like they didn't remember everything, but they were still pretty good at kind of walking us through a typical construction, how to manage it and all that. And so we found a piece of land. We went to the bank, we got a loan. I did the floor plans. Designing our house was the most stressful thing because we were both architecture nerds. So we had ideas and we couldn't agree on it. But anyways, and then so that's what we did. And it was stressful. It was long. I remember my husband like throwing up on the lot on the first week because he was so nervous. But at the end of it, we ended up really liking it. But we also house hacked it. So we designed it with an entrance to go to the basement at the back of the house to have like a basement apartment. And so we did that. Like by the time we finished building, we started working on the basement apartment, rented it out, waited the year or whatever to like refinance and get the new value with the added basement unit. And with that, we got a HELOC and we just kept going from there. So yeah, it wasn't something we planned, but we ended up loving it. And now, since then, I've had kind of a love-hate relationship with it, but it's because it's a lot of work. But yeah, no, it's been a great vehicle for us.
Okay, very interesting. Does that loan product still exist? Is that still an option for people?
It is, yeah, but it's especially popular. Like it's easier if it's your own home. If you're doing it as a secondary residence, so an investment property, it's different and it differs bank to bank, loaner to loaner. But if like as an investment property, the way to do it is that you have to show that you can have the 20% down available in some shape or form. So either a line of credit or hard cash, or maybe you can even borrow it from a private investor or something like that. But the bank needs to see that you have it available so that you're not such a big risk. And that if ever, somewhere along the construction, you need to go get that money, you can. And most of the times too, depending, usually you have to like put up that money first before you get your first draw. So you have to like kind of show due diligence. And then like eventually, so at the end of it, we don't leave any money in. Like by the time that we've got our mortgage, like our construction costs are always lower than, I don't know if I'm going into too much details there, but I'm just jumping in.
No, it's an interesting strategy I've never heard of.
Okay, cool.
And I think it sounds like a really good option for someone who wants to get started, but doesn't have a lot of money saved, but is very handy. It knows how to build a house or is very handy and can figure it out. So that sounds like a good option. I think
yeah,
we'll be interested in hearing about that. So what about you guys, Mitt and Pierre-Santh?
Yeah, honestly, for me, the journey started, Luke, as Mitt mentioned, we previously were working at Big Four accounting firms. And I know a lot of the attendees are probably still working corporate jobs as well, where, it's really long hours and you're some days when you do the math on your salary versus the amount of compensation you're receiving, especially if you're a lawyer or investment banker. Some of these professionals, sometimes it ends up being less than minimum wage when you do the math. So I started looking for different ways to make money and build wealth. And obviously real estate is one of the first search results that come up, or one of the first topics when talking to different people. And like most people, I just quickly jumped into a condo, didn't really know a strategy behind it. I just knew, okay, I'm going to purchase a piece of real estate, hold on to it for the next long while, and see if it will bring me a healthy return. So after making a few investments like that, I met with Mitt, who had started a joint venture project on a property in London, Ontario, where they were doing the BRRRR strategy. And then that's where I started to really learn about the technicals behind the BRRRR strategy, you know, what makes a good BRRRR investment property. And we dived into that strategy. Mitt, I'll let you share your side.
Yeah, thanks. For sure. So for me, I was always interested just because I went to Brockford University, so I lived on like in a student house, and we were paying like $300 rent, and I was like, how the hell is my landlord making any money? And so like we started running the numbers as a Brock University student. Was like, hey, there's actually True North mortgages out of Alberta that'll give you like an interest only mortgage, and you can get like a 30% cash on cash, or like even like up to 90% on some of the properties at the time. And we're like, we should do this. Instead, we went to the bar and drank the money away. So that didn't happen. So by the time, as Pierre said, we came back to Toronto, I was kind of like, there's no way I'm driving an hour and a half to go buy a rental property. That seems stupid. Like, I'm not going to go to St. Catharines or like to like Niagara Falls and buy it. Like, who's going to drive an hour and a half? Like, that's insane. That's stupid. No one's going to do that. Meanwhile, like at home, like I lived with my parents in Vaughan at the time, and they're like, "Oh, why don't you just buy a house here in Vaughan?" I'm like, "Who's gonna pay $450,000 or $500,000 for like a house here? Like, I'll just wait and decide to buy, right?" Pearson's shaking his head because the same house is probably worth like 1.4.
That cost you a couple million, yeah.
Yeah, so it was one of those things where, you know, a year went by and I just started investing in dividend paying stocks because that was something I could do from my computer while I was at work, kind of deal. Like I knew a lot about REITs and stuff like that, but then I ended up working for a smaller accounting firm, and they had sent me to London, Ontario for one of the audits. And prior to that, I had no idea what London, Ontario was. Even when I went there the first time, I was like, this is like we were in a bad area, and so I was like, you know, there's a bunch of crackheads here, like. This is insane. I'm never gonna like come here again. Lo and behold, later on, after working there for a few weeks or months, a few months later, I found out the controller quit. The controller was actually Matt McKeever at the time, and it took me months of breaking him down to finally get him to admit he had rental properties. Because I was like, oh, what do people do here? I guess there's like really not much to do here outside the university. Like, you know, like do people even rent here? Like what happens? And so this was like during the early times when I went there. So subsequently, once he quit, I went there to like fill in for him, and I met up with him. I was like, all right, man, like, so what happened? He's like, oh, you know, I got enough passive income from my rentals. And I'm like, shit, like, what the hell? Like, this guy's not an old guy. Like, how the heck did this happen? And it was just basically the same numbers that we had run previously, but it was just about really taking action. So I ended up just coming back over on the weekends and stuff, or basically almost every weekend. So I started driving to London like 2.5 hours each way, like on the weekend. So I should have originally just went to St. Catharines and bought those properties, but instead I paid the price. And so I drove a little bit further to London. And so that's how I met the whole like London area community as well from there. Again, had a lot of my money tied up in stocks that I didn't want to liquidate. So when we were just randomly walking through properties, and this is like when Matt first started his YouTube channel, so we just like do like deal analysis on the MLS, and we're having a scotch, and I'm like, man, there's a house for 140,000. Like this is insanity. Like someone's gonna actually sell a duplex. Like it's a duplex too. I'm like, someone's gonna sell this thing. And I'm like, all right, like, you know, we had a few drinks, and I'm like, all right, you want to just go check it out tomorrow before we go like elsewhere? So like myself, Matt, and Jeff went there. We checked the place out, and I'm like, well, I don't know what the hell I'd do to this. And then I'm like, Matt, you want to partner? Like, I'll put up the money and mortgage, whatever. And like, you take care of it and just tell me how this whole process works. Because I guess a lot of people take for granted that now there's a lot more resources and information out there on like how to like invest in real estate and do all those strategies. And like, you know, how can you maximize your BRRRR? Like back then, like if you were to do it, you were going to probably likely fail at your first 2 burrs before you finally actually made sense, unless you were like a tradesperson to begin with. So was able to leverage that relationship with Matt and joint venture with him that way. And then slowly from there, bought a few properties, but then kind of actually stopped because we were working on the accounting practice and growing it. That was a mistake. Should have kept buying properties, as I'm sure everyone will tell you. But then I also had previous experience of working at Dream Asset Management, so it was a large asset manager. So we kept asking ourselves, like, you know, how many duplexes and triplexes are we going to like kind of keep buying, and you know, how many, you know, individual tenants are we going to go run around and deal with, especially because we all have other jobs and other hustles. And so it really took us for us to all like kind of get together and decide, like, you know what, like, what's stopping us from buying like large apartment buildings? Like, I already knew a lot of the financing process from my time at Dream, especially of how to put the portfolio together and then liquidate it once it's large enough. And so we all kind of talked it through, went through the different stuff, and now that's kind of how we got into the large buildings, and flipping just became, I guess, natural. Just, or even we did like Airbnbs. We've done like everything, just because, again, when you're first trying out, you don't actually know what strategy you're going to do. And so we did like the duplex, and doing the burst strategy was the cheapest and most efficient thing.
So it kind of sounds like you tried a few different strategies and you're now focusing on the ones that work the best for you or you like the best. So it's not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not like this is.
You didn't just decide this is what I'm going to do forever. You decided, well, let me try this. Let me try this. But you know what? I didn't like this one as much. I'll focus more on that way of doing it.
Yeah, and frankly, like, I hate dealing with tenants. Like, I don't want to talk to a tenant. I don't want a tenant to even know me. So like, yeah, we have 100 units, but me and Pearson have shown up to the building, and we'll have tenants yell at us, being like, "Who are you? Why are you here? Like, you're not supposed to be here. Does like so and so know you're here? Blah blah blah." And we're just like, "Oh yeah, we asked permission from them. Yeah, it's okay for us to be here."
Yeah, exactly. All right. So it sounds to me, first of all, like there's a lot of different strategies for all of you, and that they all work in different ways. And that's the wonderful thing about real estate. It's not that you have to do exactly one strategy, that you need to do new builds like Natalie, or you have to do duplex conversions like Ian, or you have to do apartment buildings like you guys. There's so many different strategies, and you can really focus and even try out a few different ones like you guys were talking about, but you can focus on something and become successful at that. So that's nice to see. And it's also interesting. It's not like my goal my entire life has been to do this one strategy, and that's the only reason I'm successful at it. You guys have had an opportunity, had an in. It's not like it's, it was handed to you. You guys had an opportunity to try something. You decided to try it, and you continue doing it because you're able to do it successfully. So anyone can do the strategies you guys are talking about. There's nothing particular that made it that you guys can do it and nobody else can. So I think that's also nice to see for other people starting. So let me try some of the other questions here. We've got a few questions about financing. I guess one of the questions is, how do you choose an amazing mortgage broker? As in, how do you know which mortgage broker to work with? Because I mean, I don't know about you guys, I've seen this. A lot of mortgage brokers will promise you the world and very few will deliver. So how do you guys know, just quick, or not everyone has to answer, if any of you guys have kind of a tip on how to know who's a good mortgage broker, or how do you find a mortgage broker?
Yeah, I guess I'll give my quick 2 cents on that. Like with mortgage brokers, I would say the first thing is making sure you're working with a mortgage broker that works with investors. Although if you're buying residential real estate and they have experience financing deals for end users, things can still be very different when it comes to an investing perspective, especially if you're trying to grow a portfolio. Oftentimes you're going to purchase the property, do the rentals, and then refinance it, for example, if you're using the BRRRR strategy. So having a mortgage broker that actually understands and has worked with investors is usually what I look for, even better if they're an investor themselves.
Okay, so either an investor themselves, or at least they work with investors, because when you're looking to do it as an investment, it's not the same as living in it. So that's good. Okay. And I guess I'd also add on that referrals from other people who are using them as well as always. That helps with the kind of over-promising, right? Because if they've actually been able to do it for someone, that will help. another question here is, what are the best ways to get financing once you've hit the maximum mortgage roadblocks with A-list lenders? So I guess most A-list lenders, they kind of stop you around 4 mortgages where they don't really want you to have any more property. So what kind of quick tips do you guys have for people in that situation?
Yeah, so I would say like on our end, we just pay the higher interest rates and use B lenders or privates. Like
B lenders.
at the end of the day, like if you're gonna if your deal makes sense and you can make money by utilizing that, like paying 3.5%, 4%, we paid even at times like 10% on buildings too, for the purpose of the year, because we knew we were going to be able to burr the property. And the question comes down to, do you want to get the deal done, or is it so much that 1 year worth of interest or 1% or 2% of interest is going to kill you? If that's the case, then realistically, or even if that's what's going to hold you back, you're using false limitations to slow your trajectory and growth. So like, you rather just pay the 2% higher and be able to buy more properties and effectively leverage and grow faster, versus trying to penny pinch on every single mortgage. At least that's my opinion.
And yeah, and it sounds like getting the right mortgage broker, our previous question, they'll be able to point you in the right direction as well.
I'm not at the point where like I'm capped out on how many properties I have and stuff, but I think sometimes people ask that question before they even have 1 or 2. So I'd also want to add, like, if you're asking that question and you're not at a point where that's happening, don't think about your 8th, 9th, 10th property yet. Like, focus on doing 1, 2, 3 and getting that start, as opposed to imagining these problems. Because I think sometimes we like to think about these forward problems, but just deal with what you've got in front of you. And then also to add to Mitt's point, like, if it's that tight that you can't do it with a B lender or something, like, what kind of deal do you have?
Okay.
Yeah, I also want to add to another thing, because we hit that wall. We were switched over to the commercial side of the bank at one point, and the best thing to have in your back pocket is your team. So like your lawyer and your accountant. For us, like, we started talking to them. Okay, for the lawyer, what do we do? How do we make the bank feel more comfortable? So do we open up a holding company and have like an operation company? So we restructured the companies that way, and what was like safest in terms of liability. And then with the accountant side, we asked him to get contacts for private lenders. What was the best way to get like the financing? What do banks look for when they're looking at commercial lending? How do we make our finances work and our taxes and stuff like that? So you need those people who really, a lawyer who's good in real estate and an accountant who's good in investing, specifically, like mostly, just investing real estate. So if you have those team members, they can usually guide you and help you. An insurance broker too will help. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, another question, since we're on the financing topic. Question a little bit specific, but someone said, assuming I still have that I have enough cash from my savings, a HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit, a PLOC, I guess professional line of credit, to buy a property. So assuming I have enough, essentially I have enough savings and line of credit money available to buy a property, would it still make sense for me to get a mortgage from a bank to close this deal so that I have more capital for future deals and BRRRRs? Or should I close this one with cash?
I think mortgage all the way. If you can rework your capital into other deals and other deals, do that, as long as you're able to cash flow on that deal. I don't believe in a non-cash flowing property. So if you can have a mortgage and you still cash flow on your property, keep your cash, reinvest it after. If you can, get that mortgage, just try to keep as much capital on hand. Let the renters pay your mortgages and your expenses. That's how you'll scale quickly.
Yeah, I agree with Natalie. If you're able to get a mortgage, definitely get the mortgage. Don't lock up your cash. The only situation where I would put cash down is, again, Luke, I'm sure you see this all the time, where it's a property that's not in a livable condition and the bank won't finance it. So that you go ahead, buy it in cash, quickly do the rentals to make it livable condition and get it refinanced and get a traditional mortgage on it.
Yeah, and I think that ties into what you were mentioning earlier, the BRRRR. We can expand a little bit on what the BRRRR strategy is, because it does tie into that. When you're finished this renovation, what it doesn't mention in this question is what is the condition of the property. So you're buying this property and it's turnkey, ready to go, there's nothing to do, or does it need a lot of work? In which case, if you are buying cash at the end of it is worth more, and then you can get the mortgage then. Now you're getting your money back out to reuse. So Pierre-Saint, you had mentioned the BRRRR strategy. Can you explain a little bit what is the BRRRR strategy and why is that helpful to new investors?
Yeah, for sure, Luke. So the BRRRR strategy stands for buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat. So this is one of the most familiar strategies for a lot of beginner investors because it allows you to constantly recycle your capital and redeploy it into new projects and thus scale your portfolio faster. So essentially, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to buy a property that's under market value and has room for its after repair value to be increased. So, you know, an example of a BRRRR that Mid and I had done was we picked up a property for about $220,000. We sunk in about $40,000 into it to get the renovations done, get it into a livable condition. The bank came in, appraised the property at about $400,000. They're going to finance you 80% of that value. So your initial down payment will come out, your renovation costs will come out, and in this case, it's more than a full BRRRR. So you'll actually get some additional equity out of the property, and the property will cash flow as is. You can take all of those funds and use it towards purchasing another one and essentially repeating the process.
Absolutely. And if we're using cash like the previous situation, you buy this property for 220, you spend 40,000, is that right? You spent 260,000 of your cash, it appraises for 400. That sounds a little optimistic, but not impossible. And the bank's going to lend you 80% of that, which is 320. So the bank is going to cut you a check for 320,000 when you only invested 260,000. Now you've gotten all your money back plus some. That's more than the perfect BRRRR. And in Ontario, it's a little unrealistic to get all of your money out or more. It's possible, but very unlikely. Even if you can just recapture some of that renovation money, that way you haven't burned up all your capital, and you can, as long as you still have borrowing ability, you can go on to the next property. So that's why it's so great. And we did have one of the reasons I was tying it into the BRRRR is we had a question specifically about BRRRRs just now in the chat. So do you think the BRRRR method can be applied for condo units? It seems like a simpler reno that's more focused on finishes and easier to rent out. Do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I think it's doable, but it's going to depend on like how you bought the condo. Like if you're buying off market, you're not likely going to do it. We actually had an opportunity like that show up, I want to say like a year and 2 months ago, and we just didn't have the time to do it. But it was something where, yeah, it was going to be a quick 20K reno, and we would have been able to BRRRR the thing. But those are like far and rare in between to come upon. So you'd have to usually get it like privately yourself.
I also want to add, be careful with condos because condo fees always go up, and you want to watch that cash flow. So that first condo we initially bought, we sold it and we made like no money. Like depending on your location, condos will not appreciate as fast as like other types of housing. That might not be the case in like Toronto or whatever, but yeah. So they don't appreciate as high yet. Condo fees do. Condo fees are not shy to keep increasing. So then if you have a tenant that's been in there for X amount of years, you can't increase the rent. Eventually, you might end up having a negative cash flow. I've had a condo. I've done the whole condo thing. I never want a condo again in my life. That's just me though, and that's maybe just my market, but I just wanted to, give people that heads up to look into those numbers when you're looking at a condo.
And where was that condo, Natalie?
In Limoges. So it's like not really a good town for that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Because I do, we have a couple condos in Toronto, not our main focus, we have a couple condos, and I do actually personally like condo townhouses because they're kind of good first-time homes for young families in that kind of situation. They're easy to rent, easy to sell if you need to. Condo fees are a little lower because you don't have elevators and usually pools and stuff like that. But then also as a landlord, I don't have to do the roof, often the windows, the exterior maintenance, the drive, the snow plow. I don't have to deal with any of that. So
yeah, I can see that for a condo townhouse. I can see that being a better appealing option. We had just like a little, typical condo, and
a box in the sky.
And then you had to deal with the meetings and the complaining neighbors, and oh god, never again.
Yes. Awesome. All right, let me see some of the other questions we have here. Okay, so I'm not sure if anyone has any comments on this, but when you're BRRRing large multifamilies, or just in general, I guess, buying large multifamilies, 10 plus units, what's a good source for determining the cap rates for smaller cities used to calculate ARVs for refinancing? So basically, where are you going to find, how do you find out what the cap rate is in smaller towns for multifamily buildings?
Yeah, so what you're gonna have to do, you can go to CBRE's website and you can pull up like a cap rate report that's get published quarterly. That's gonna give it to you for major cities. If you're more of a smaller market, then typically you can use like the closest market to you and then add one or two to it. If you have a good relationship with appraisers, especially commercial appraisers, like for us, because we buy a lot of buildings, we literally will just hit up the appraiser and say, hey, this is where the rents are looking like on this building. We're making this offer. Like, you think we're going to appraise like this, or should we like be going back to ask for like a VTB? And usually they'll say like, you know what, based on what the building sold in the area, this is likely where we'll put the cap. So that's how I would determine what the cap rate is. You can also just take a look at, if you sign up for Altus Group's website as well, I think once a quarter or once every few months, they'll send out a report of the most recently sold buildings. You won't necessarily know the rents, but what you'll know is what purchase price it sold for. So these are some larger apartment buildings. So if you're looking at more high-rise type of buildings, they're going to be at a lower cap rate than a low-rise building. And the reason for that is that the type of investor who's usually buying it is more of an institutional investor. So they're going to pay a little bit lower. So again, in comparison, just add an extra like one to the cap rate and you'll be there. But again, you never know. Depending on the market, people will fight and will go crazy for things. So they might give you the same cap rate as a high-rise. But that'd be my recommendation for trying to figure out your cap rate.
So appraisers for one, Altus Group, is that free or is it paid? And if so, how much would that cost?
Yeah, so like the report where they send you just like what's been sold once a quarter or something like that, that's free. You just sign up for their newsletter.
So then you can know cap rates based on that. Does that show the cap rate, or is that something?
It doesn't show the cap rate. It shows like price per unit, and then you can kind of back your way into what the cap rate would be, just based on, I don't know. Once you're in the space of looking at multifamily, like you kind of know where rents will be for like typical buildings and like of different ages.
For sure. Yeah, once you get to, especially if you get to know an area. If it's a new area, it's a little harder each time. But if you're focusing in an area, it helps to, and it sounds like all of you guys are generally focused.
And a big thing I'd say is don't listen to seller agents, right? Like you can call listings and they'll be like, yeah, here we're selling for 4 caps. And you're like, no, you're a small market. No, who the hell's paying you for? You want to buy all my properties? I'll give it to you at 4 caps. Like,
yeah.
Don't like they're obviously in their best interest to try to sell it for the highest possible price, but typically in those scenarios you're gonna have to usually get like a VTB from the seller because the bank's not going to use the same type of valuation.
Okay. So for anyone who's looking, that's Altus, ALTUS, and you think you can just find that Googling that, Mitt?
Yep, and CBRE's cap rate.
CBRE. Okay. So kind of their sold report or something like that. Okay. Someone did just ask as well, we were just talking about the cap rates. Can someone explain, quick overview, what does a cap rate do? What is it?
So cap rate is like what's called a capitalization rate. So what it does is it takes the net operating income and divides it by the market value and gives you a percentage. So what this allows you to basically do is be able to compare investments across the board, so that whether you're looking at a multifamily building in Toronto versus something in London, cap rates will vary. So like a cap rate in Toronto is going to probably be closer to 3 or less, but in London it might be higher at, let's call it a 4.5, 5. Yes, that's going to make it so lower the cap rate, the higher the valuation will be in comparison to the net operating income. And what this lets you or gives you as a reference when you're an investor is that you can basically determine that, hey, how much in rent do I need to increase this building for me to be able to increase the value by so many dollars? So just to give a quick example, if you like typically some of the units that we buy, on average, we're going to turn over it for about $700 to $1,000 increase it in rent, right? So let's call it for $700 a month across the year. That's about $8,400. And typically the markets that we're in are usually like under 5, but I'm going to use the 5 cap rate. Just by turning over one unit, the value of the building will, on an income approach basis, will increase about $168,000. So inherently will be able to refinance about 134,000 back. And so that cap rate is going to give you a reference of like, hey, am I going to really be able to burn my money back out? Yeah, if you're buying at a higher cap rate, is that because there hasn't really been a lot of appreciation in that market? So it's good things to understand. Typically, the smaller the market you go to, the higher the cap rate will be, and that's just because there's obviously less supply, but there's a lot less demand in comparison to larger markets like Toronto or the GTA.
Yeah, and more risk potentially, or lenders may view it as more.
Like lenders will predominantly like stay away, especially the big five banks. Like you have to probably, especially in very, very small markets, look at using just credit unions to finance your thing.
Yeah, I'll try to make a simple example for cap rates as well, just round numbers. Let's say you have a large multifamily building. You're looking at the net, you're looking at the income and the expenses, but you're not taking into account any financing costs. So let's say the building rents total $10,000 a month, that's $120,000 a year. So the building generates $120,000 a year in income. For simple numbers, let's just say there's $20,000 in expenses and utilities and property taxes, maintenance, lawn care, vacancy, etc. You're gonna have $20,000 in expenses. So your net operating income is $100,000. So when you capitalize that, if you had, let's say, a 10 cap, so what you do is you divide by 0.1, basically you're dividing by 10%. Is that right? Yeah. So 10 cap, so that's giving you $100,000 in net operating income. At a 10 cap is $1 million in value. But if it was a 5 cap, that same $100,000 in income, a 5 cap gives you $2 million in value. So that's why cap rates can affect it so much. And multifamily buildings are a really interesting beast because they're fully valued on kind of the money they generate, right? So it's not about how pretty they are within reason. You might get a slightly better, lower cap rate for a higher quality construction building, but otherwise it's not really about how well it's built, what it looks like. It's about how much money it can make you. That's really what multifamily investing is about. So the wonderful thing is that, let's say, a cap rate, as Mitt was saying there, if you can generate an extra $100 in rent net, no extra expenses, but you get an extra $100 in rent total, it's worth $2,000 more at a 5 cap. That's how much you can multiply these things, right? So like $1,000 a year in rent, $20,000 increase that you could sell the building for at a 5 cap. And obviously if cap rates are lower, it multiplies it even more. So that's the interesting thing about cap rates. That's what can make commercial so interesting. All right, another question. We have a question a bit about construction. Yeah. So this was specific for basement SDU, but we could talk generally. What would be the biggest common mistakes when hiring a construction company / subcontractors to do a basement SDU project from start to finish? So kind of what are the common things, what are the common problems you're going to encounter for basement SDU specifically? And if anyone else wants to ask, or just, well, maybe Natalie, actually, if you could tell us common mistakes you're going to have when hiring subs and contractors for new builds as well.
I'm trying to think, because we've had the same trades for so long that I don't really remember. Honestly, I'm not too sure. I mean, obviously make sure that if you're in Ontario, make sure that they have WSIB. Okay, because especially your financer. So that's like, I don't know if the WSIB doesn't exist in other provinces, I'm assuming, right? But anyways, it's just that's the typical insurance that the trades need, and they absolutely need that. Your lenders are going to ask for that. So you make sure that they have all their credentials and everything. You can check for references. Like I said, I'm probably not the best to answer that because I've had the same trades for 6 years now. I haven't gotten anyone new in a long time.
And maybe we'll come back to you on how you have the same trades for 6 years.
Okay, well, it's a small town. There you go.
That's all there is. I mean, I personally can tell you, I find with construction, it's very hard to find a good, construction team that stays. I find if they're kind of that middle price range that works for you, and like good enough quality that also works, because I like my units to be a little bit on the nicer side as well. I find either the quality goes down or the price goes up. It's hard to get that balance.
Well, a good trick too is pay them when as soon as, like, if they did the work quick and well, then pay them right away, because then they want to keep working for you. And then the next time that you have a job lined up and you call them to line them up, they'll say, well, like they pay me right now, this new guy, I don't know him, so I'm going to go do Nat and Rob's job first, right? So you get the service, you end up having like a friendship with these guys, and they just want to work for you. You want to make the site fun for them too. Like, we'll bring pizza sometimes, we'll hide some beer for them if they want it, right? So it's just like on a Friday, it's not all the time. But yeah, you just make them want to work for you, especially in a competitive market like this year. All the trades are super busy, so it's very hard to find them, but yet we're not having any issues still to get our guys. So
Okay.
Yeah, do you mind if I jump in there and add some stuff? We've for me, like I did a bit of my own first project and got that done myself, and hired some guys and went through the process of learning what it takes to do the project. And that was one of the reasons I house hacked in the first place, was really to understand like the technical side of what I've got to build, what has to get done. And not everybody has to take that approach. Like, you can write checks and you can make things happen. And honestly, as you progress, that's the easier way to make things happen. But I found I wanted to learn it and just educate myself. So that's why I did that route. And then last year, people started asking me to do projects for them. So I didn't mention it in the intro, but I started a contracting business too. So for me, the reason I did that was, one, I had people asking me to do it. So that was another business that I could start, in the same way that rental properties is a business. And also then when I had my projects to do, I had my guys available. So I could just keep people busy. Keep the trades busy, subcontractors, everyone, and really put together that network of people who know what I need, what I want. And I brought in a business partner for that business too. And we have 5 duplexes and some triplexes going right now. We've got another one coming next month. So running, having a full-time job, running the contracting business, I have my real estate license as well. And then having my own investment properties is definitely a lot of work, but staying super organized and having repeat people that I can go to and know what I need and what I want. We all have different strategies here, and I think it's interesting to hear everybody's strategy. But for me, it's just like rinse and repeat and try and do the same thing, because you don't have to retrain yourself and relearn every time. So finding somebody who's done it before is pretty important.
Okay. All right. So working with people who have done it before. Always a good strategy, good referrals as well, right? One of the things I was going to say that I like about both Natalie and Ian's strategy is, as long as the next provincial government doesn't change the rules, is right now there's no rent control essentially on new units. So in my understanding, and this is what I understand, don't take my word for it, but when I'm doing duplex conversion projects, the basement apartment is a completely new unit that hasn't been lived in before. So I'm no longer subject to rent control. So for example, in some areas, rents have kind of gone down through the pandemic, but they're going to jump back up as population moves back to urban centers. I'm not going to be limited by the province's 1.5–2% increases. I'll be able to increase it to market once per year. So that's one of the nice things I like. Ian, with your strategy, maybe the upstairs unit you can't do that, but the basement or your third unit, you should be able to increase those to market rent, as long as the government, because it was taken away and then it was made allowed again as of, I believe, November 2018, I believe. So it's a good strategy for people. And same thing for you, Natalie. I mean, anything new built that's finished after November 2018, you're not going to be limited on that.
Yeah, I'd heard of that, Luke. I think we spoke about it once. It was something that I've actually forgotten about, because when we're doing our new units, we're getting market rents, right? They're fresh and they're new. Mm-hmm. But that's an important point that you make. So thanks for reminding me.
Awesome. Okay. So a question I wanted to ask all of you as well is, and this is helpful for those who are considering investing while they work a full-time job. So what systems, and this is for each of you, what systems do you use to keep your side hustle organized and rolling like a well-oiled machine? Or what types of systems do you have in place to free up time? How do you work a full-time job and invest heavily in real estate on the side?
I can address the rental management side of that. The construction side, we're still figuring that out. It's definitely time consuming, and we're working on processes right now. It's going to involve probably like an online management system of some sort. But the rental management side, I would say to everyone, the one book that really helped me was the Yellow Book by Brendan Turner, how to manage rental properties. I really love that book. There's a lot of good nuggets in there and a lot of documents that he includes. But for one thing, to me, it was to make sure that all tenant communication was done via email so that my phone stays liberated, unless of an emergency, of course. But when it's an emergency, usually call 911. So like our phones, like it's too easy for a tenant to send a text, but it takes more time to send an email. So we found that by doing emails, we reduce that. And then we can just kind of have an admin in the office, if like part-time or something, and she can just be forwarding those maintenance requests to like the plumber, the HVAC guy or whatever like that. So we're doing a lot of systems that way, but still figuring out the construction side, because that's definitely time consuming and not there yet.
Awesome. Anybody else have anything else they want to add to that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, man.
Yeah, on my end, I guess starting off, and I know Pearson mentioned this too, is that, you know, as we were busy at our jobs, but we still wanted to get into and get the experience, we just partnered with someone who was able to manage it more hands-on, and that still gave us that experience and understanding, so that when we finally were able to then, you know, build out more systems and things like that, we could do it ourselves later. So just leverage others.
Yep. And then just to add on to what Mid said initially, when you know, we were working really long hours, et cetera, it was just carving up that time and setting up a routine. So like when you do have off time in the evening, initially it's definitely going to be a grind. Like put the time into analyze deals, make offers, you know, educate yourself as much as possible on your off time. And then, you know, as your portfolio grows and you have a little bit more cash flow to play with, you can invest that into property managers or virtual assistants and things like that to help make things easier.
Awesome.
Yeah, ultimately you have to decide where you're spending your time. So if you're getting into a flip or a rental, if you're going to do the work, like now that they're building stuff, they're creating something, you're spending your time doing that work, or you can spend your time trying to lease out the property or source the deal. Just figure out where your highest and best use is. Some of the things that I've done to free up time for myself is definitely using Google Docs and technology, where it's a repeatable process and you kind of just, it grows over time. You just try and list out all the things that you do. For property management, like one thing that happens is if you post a listing on Facebook, you'll get messages like, hi, is this available nonstop? And then you're responding the same thing every single time. So basically I created a Google form, and it's a link in the ad, and it says to fill out this information. And then you can kind of screen and see which people are applying for stuff. So that's a simple way to save yourself some time. And then you set up appointments and try and do open house type of deal to show up and show potential tenants the place. It's a simple thing to save some time on the tenanting side.
Okay, awesome. All great answers. One question I'd love to ask all the time: what is each one of you on here has done a number of deals? What was your favorite, when you think back to the ones you've done, which is your favorite deal that you've done? And maybe it's just your favorite deal because you've made the most money, or maybe it's your favorite deal because you learned the most on it or made the biggest mistakes, or the whole thing was just a nightmare, but it turned out really, really well. So what was your absolute favorite property or deal that you've done, and why is that? And I know that's a tough one, but I'm always curious, right? I know you guys have all done a number of deals. So what's that one deal that just sticks out to you? I know for us on our end, what deal that is of the couple hundred that we've done recently, and we have one that just sticks out in our head because of the scenario and how we helped the seller, and also, you know, the problems that went with it. So who wants to jump in first and answer that? So Mitt, you look like you got a big smile on your face. You look like you're ready to go with this one.
No, I'm just trying to think of which one I should be telling, and you know, if it's my favorite. If I would say favorite, I would probably say it's like the first duplex that I bought, just because it did do the kickoff of my real estate investing journey. I would say I was someone who was like probably trapped in analysis paralysis for a really long time, and when it came down to it, it was like, all right, to get this deal going, I just need 28K, and it was like, fuck it. All right, Pierce. I call Pearson. I'm like, hey man, we need like 16K each. So I'm like, all right, do you have 16K for me? Or actually, I call another buddy. The other buddy's like, no, man, like you don't know anything about houses. I'm like, fuck. I'm like, I'm gonna have to sell my stocks. I don't want to do that.
Did you
So
lead with that question, Mitt? Do you like, hey man, you got 16 grand? Is that did you lead with that when you called?
No. I said, hey man, I'm in London right now. I'm looking at this property. Think it'd be a really solid rental, like, you know, and maybe Pearson remembers it better than me. But basically that's kind of the pitch that I was going for. And the part that I really appreciated was that Pearson's like, okay, when do you need the money by? So for me, that was great just because I guess from there I found a partner who I've been able to grow a large portfolio with, and that the success of that one really did continue my journey. I know if I had say just bought something myself and tried to do it myself and had failed, like that could have just been sort of the end of my journey then too.
Okay, awesome. Pearson, what do you think here? Is that with same as you, or you got something different?
No, I got a different one. That was the one
Okay.
that definitely started and, you know, really kicked the journey off for sure. But for me, it would definitely be our recent Cambridge flip. Like, you know, prior to that, me and Mid had done a bunch of flips where it was just interior renovations, you know, sprucing up the place inside, increasing the ARV and flipping it that way. Whereas this was our first ever like build per se. We broke this one down to the original foundation and just built it from the ground up. So our first like hands-on build. And it was a humbling experience because now we're working with new tradesmen that we typically don't work with, a lot of foundational stuff that we have to address and things like that. So, you know, a lot of learning lessons on that deal. The project came out beautifully. We made money on it, so that's great. Could have made more if we knew, if we were a little bit more experienced on that side. But for the learning lessons that we took and the profits that we took from that deal, I think it really made it enjoyable.
Awesome.
And I was laughing because I was thinking about that one, but didn't want to talk about it.
Ian, Natalie, what sticks out in your mind, and what'd you learn?
I'd say the second deal I did. So the first one was the house hack, but the second deal that I did is the strategy I'm employing today, which is the duplex. And it was a tough challenge. Like it took 3 months to try and tie up that deal. So I felt like I worked for it, and then finishing the renovations and everything, it really taught me a lot, and I learned a lot about the construction side of things. And then by the end of it, it was a perfect burr. I had all my money out, which is pretty rare. It's kind of a unicorn, and we still aim for that, but it's getting tougher. And that project taught me how to do it, and since then, I've been doing multiple of them. So it was the catalyst for what's happened to the state.
Okay, awesome. Natalie?
I'm still thinking. There's I mean, I loved my house and I still do because it just keeps appreciating, and we have like great cash flow. Plus it's anyways, it's a good house, but at the same time, it's not really like a typical investment property. So maybe there was one that we built. It was a semi-detached, a side-by-side duplex. We learned a lot with that one. That's the one where my husband got to quit his job, and like halfway through, he got to start working in it full time. We got a really, really crap tenant in one of the sides, so learned a lot with that too. All of my processes, that yellow book came in handy at that point. And we ended up dividing the building, selling it off each side. We had invested $0 in it, and I think at the end, I'd have to check my numbers again, but I think at the end we ended up like we had a really, really good profit on it. Plus we still cash flowed for the 2 years that we owned it. So yeah, it was that one was a great property, but it was also kind of a stressful property because of that tenant and all those, but selling it was good because we got to get rid of her at the same time. But yeah, no, I'm trying to think. We're probably other ones. Another one that's going to be one of my favorite is one we're building right now, but because the cash was going to be really good, but I want to have it finished before I can confirm that.
Awesome. Here's the toughest question you might be asked tonight, but I think it's a fitting question. We got a few hundred people on here, and we've discussed, we have a variety of ranges in experience. We have brand new people looking to get into it. What is the worst mistake that you've made in any of your deals, and whether it cost you money, your time? And again, I know it's a tough question. It's like that interview question when they ask you, what's your biggest weakness? right? And I know it's a question that, you kind of get a little bit vulnerable on, but I'm sure there's, maybe it wasn't a huge mistake, but maybe there's a mistake. You're like, I'm never going to make that mistake again. Right. Natalie, I'm going to go to you because I think you look like you've figured that one out. What would that be?
Not well screening tenants. Like there was one house that we did not screen a family well, and it ended in total chaos and crap. Just because I can't swear here right now, but I would. So I definitely think that you really need to properly screen tenants, because they will turn a good investment property into a bad one. They will turn a good situation into a bad one. They will create a lot of stress for you. Like we were so stressed with that property. So that was one of our biggest mistakes, but at the same time, probably one of the best, because like we did a complete 180 on that. Our processes are completely different when screening. And
could you, if you don't mind, could you just, just real quickly, kind of lay out a couple of the really important screening, scenarios that you look after, that you cover?
Yeah, for sure. For me, the number one important thing is references. Call the references, like previous and current landlord, especially if they've never rented before, then an employment for sure. We always ask for any landlord in the past 5 years and an employment reference. And if there's like 2 tenants applying, it's 2 references per tenant, right? Every person over the age of 18 that's going to be residing in the home has to fill out an application. And what else? So reference is super important. That also makes sure that you can verify the income. And then we're not like super strict on credit, but we do ask for, like, if they can provide a credit screenshot to make sure that it's not completely horrible. Because I've had tenants who have been amazing tenants, but they had bad credit because maybe they had I don't know, something happened in the past and they were working on their credit again, yet the rent was always paid. So I try not to keep credit against people. I think references speak for themselves, and that's the most important part. And that's one thing that we didn't do with that family I was talking about. And so that was mistake number 1 that cost us a lot.
Awesome. Ian, what was your biggest mistake, buddy?
I can think of one. It wasn't massive, but it was a really tough week at work. So with the job, I had brought on somebody, because we go through different trades, right? You gotta find different people. And I brought somebody on who said, they could do a bunch of work and they could handle this and blah, blah, blah. And the guy ended up being a lunatic. And I was at work and he had been drinking, and he talked about threatening another trade, and he talked about coming over and damaging the property. And it was pretty stressful. So I was at work and trying to talk this guy down and, keep him calm. But alcohol does things to people. And so he took like a load of trash and just dumped it all over the driveway. Obviously drove drunk to get there. Some pretty bad stuff. And then, police had to get involved and get rid of that situation. So that was pretty stressful.
Ian, I was waiting for you to go, and that's why you don't employ family.
Yeah, no, my family, they're a good support, actually. None of us here do this stuff alone. I run through these ideas with parents and sisters and friends and family, and just try and get different perspectives. But that was a tough one with people. So even on Natalie's, that was a person, right? It's usually it involves somebody else. So whether it's a tenant or a trade, that can really make your life a little stressful. No major mistakes though.
Okay. That's good. That's good. Pierce, Anth, or Mitt, what do you guys got?
Yeah, for sure. I think, a mistake we made early on in the process was, especially having full-time jobs. And at one point we hired a project manager to come on and manage some of the projects. And, not properly, we had a few referrals, but not doing that additional due diligence. And just since they're a project manager and have that experience, we decided to be a little bit more hands-off and just check in on a monthly basis rather than, being more involved as if I was managing the project myself. And, that ended up being a mistake, because with this particular person, the project really fell behind, trades weren't being lined up the correct way. and it caused a lot of hiccups in the deal versus if I managed it myself. So I would say when you bring on a project manager, same way with contractors, check in often, making sure they're doing their job right before you take more of a hands-off approach. So maybe on the 5th or 6th project, you can start to really back away after there's been multiple successes.
Yeah, I know for us, even with Luke, and Luke's worked with his general contractor for a little while, but he still checks in, right, to make sure things are going exactly how he wants, right, to make sure we communicated the right things, right. So it's never been a full hands-off approach, right. It's always just checking in all the way along the line until you really build that trust with them, right. So yeah.
Yeah, another thing I just add is also if you're looking to do like joint ventures and stuff like that, making sure your joint venture partner has the correct expertise. Like there was a time where I partnered with someone who said they had the expertise to actually renovate the place and do things, and they clearly didn't. And at the end of the day, walked away with the loss, and I made my other partners all whole. Actually, I guess there's two folds. If you bring on joint venture partners and the project doesn't go as well, and you want them to be your joint venture partners or your money partners in the future, always make them whole. They're always going to come back and they're going to trust you. And then blacklist the JV partners or people who say they can do work and then they can't do it. And then don't forget about the blacklist. Keep the blacklist alive. Share the blacklist.
So thanks for Corey for covering for me there. I'm also glad he did. I didn't want to talk about all of my mistakes. I've made so many. Would have taken the rest of the evening. We have a lot of questions on joint venture partners. So do you recommend working with joint venture partners on either side? Typically, you have kind of a working joint venture partner and kind of a more silent money joint venture partner. So do you recommend working with joint venture partners, and what should you consider when finding partners?
Yeah, so Mid and I have done both sides. When we first started out, we were the joint venture partners on the passive side. And then more recently, we've been the joint venture partners on the active side as well. Now slowly transitioned away from being joint ventures. So now we've hit all the different stages. So when you're first starting out, I definitely recommend being a joint venture partner. It gives you an opportunity to really learn. So, some people want to be a joint venture partner to be hands-off and passive. Some people want a joint venture because they don't know what they're doing. They can work with someone and leverage their experience to actually understand how to implement the strategy and make money and actually do this. So from that perspective, I strongly recommend it. As we transition to the operating side as well, it's a great way to scale, especially if capital is a limitation, getting mortgages is a limitation, etc. Utilizing money partners can help you grow the portfolio that way and continue to keep doing deals. And then now slowly we're at a point where we don't need that additional financing component, and we want to just keep growing the portfolio on our own, and we just rely more on private lending.
So I'd say a big aspect of that is understanding why you're going to be going into the joint venture. Right. So if you can understand why you're going to go into it, then it can always make sense for you to just always continue to keep joint venturing. And there's people whose whole strategy is just joint venturing with, people who either do new builds or doing the burst strategy or just doing flips, because some people just don't want to be involved at all. But then there's others who say, hey, you know what, for a certain portion of my portfolio, I'm not going to be in, say, the Ottawa market. I'm going to joint venture with Luke because I have zero interest in trying to build a whole new team there, but I want exposure. So if you assess it from that aspect, I think a lot of new investors have difficulty, I guess, when they look at JVs, especially in the beginning, is they're like, wait, I'm qualifying for the mortgage and I'm giving you the money and I'm giving you half the property. What the hell? I tell these people, look in the mirror. If you can go do a deal right now without a joint venture partner, go ahead and do it. If you think you're going to make the exact same kind of money, what you're paying for is all the time, expertise, and all the mistakes that you've made, right? It's like going to a lawyer and being like, all right, I'm going to pay you the same thing as like some guy who opened up and read a law textbook, right? Like, it's not the same thing. You're paying for all the time and years that they went and articles learned and they actually practice. So similarly with a joint venture partner, especially in real estate, that's what you're doing. But at the same time, make sure you vet their underlying deals to understand, like, do they actually have that experience, or did they just do like one or two and now they're saying that they've done a lot more when they haven't?
Okay. Anyone else? Do you recommend working with joint venture partners, and what should you consider when finding partners?
For me, I've done both. I've got a buddy from university that I partnered up with. I found the property, I manage it. It doesn't take a ton of work. This one was different from what I usually do. Is do build 2 units, and part of it is simply like doing it with friends. Some people question that. Some people say it's good. Some people say it's bad. But being in the game together, like that's the purpose, is to have fun. And somebody who like, if you're trying to like sell somebody into a joint venture and convince them that's a great idea, I don't personally go that route, but they're approaching me and saying, "Hey, can we do this?" And explain the risks and the rewards, and you go for it. We've done other joint ventures where somebody put up the funds, and I did the work and got it done at cost, and that was a great opportunity. Somebody I still work with to this day, and it's more about the relationship almost, rather than just like I have access to financing, I can qualify. There's a lot of deals that I can do on my own, but it's more about building relationships and having a good time with people that you want to do business with, right? You're in it together. It can't just be some person that you're trying to get money from because you want their money. Like that's not what a JV is. It's about building something together, and ultimately your goal should be to do 1, 2, 3, like multiple, not just the first one. So you've got to make sure that you produce a good result.
Yeah, for sure. And to add on to what Ian said, it really resonated with me, because you don't want to be partnering with like 10 different joint venture partners for one deal each. Like try to have 3 or 4, like a small amount, and do as many deals as possible with them.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Natalie? Or
I'm not a big joint venture person. We've talked about it. We've had a lot of people approach us and wanting to do stuff with us. In the end, we're kind of just lone wolves. We might jump into something if we go into big, like we're going to do a bigger build. We're looking into building a 24 unit. But even then, we're going to try and do it alone. That's just who we are. But I'm not going to let an opportunity pass me either. If ever something comes by and it's a JV partnership, then I will consider it. But the terms have to be really good for me to get into it, just because it's never been a comfort zone thing for me. But that's just me.
okay, so I actually think that's a good expansion on that, because sometimes I've seen. I don't do a lot of joint. My wife and I do most of our properties ourselves. We've done a few joint venture properties here and there. We don't do it very heavily, but I remember one time I was looking for a joint venture partner, and a couple of people reached out to me, and some of the people who reached out had this kind of attitude that, well, I have the money, I have the borrowing ability, I'm the golden goose. You should be bowing down to me and doing everything I want you to do, and serving me because I have the money. So I guess that kind of asked Natalie, they have the money, they have the mortgage ability. Why don't you want them? Why don't you necessarily definitely want to grab them right away and share half of your project with them?
Because your knowledge and skills and knowing what you do is worth more than their money, because I can get money anywhere. It's the expertise I need. So that golden goose guy can get lost. I'm not interested.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what some people mentioned too, that it's about finding the right partner. It's finding a partner, and I definitely don't mean don't vet. If you're a money partner and you're looking for an active partner, definitely vet them well. But you guys should be able to work together. You should be able to trust each other, where it's like, oh, $1,000 left the account. I want you to send me the invoice immediately for this plumber that you say you paid. Give me the plumber's number. I want to make sure you actually paid him. You don't want that kind of joint venture relationship, because you're giving up as the active partner. When you don't have the ability to get other financing, a money partner from the joint venture's perspective is very, very valuable, right? It allows you to continue scaling and continue buying more properties and growing your portfolio, because 50% of something is way better than 100% of nothing. However, if you have the ability to do it on your own, sometimes you have to question, well, do I want to give up half when I could potentially do this on my own? Maybe I could do it on my own. And there's so many things to do about that. Let's say I could do a project on my own, but I'm going to have to go to an alternative lender, and now I'm paying, maybe in this case, 2% higher in interest. So and I'm fronting the capital, which might limit me on a future project. So I have the money now, or I could bring in a joint venture partner. They're going to qualify at a better rate, and I'm going to save my capital to potentially be able to do another project. what's the right answer? I don't think there is one. I think it depends on your scenario and the time. And for me, it's a time thing. It's when I do joint venture, when I consider a joint venture partner, I have to ask, I'm limited on how many projects I can do more than I have a limit on the amount of money I'm able to find and borrow and that. So that's where I'm limited personally. And that, I don't know if you guys have an opinion on that, but for me, it's more the time. I can't do more projects time-wise. So I'd rather keep more of the ones that I'm able to actually complete.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, you know, if your team continues to grow and then they have idle capacity, and then you say, well, I got a team who can basically do all the work, then it might be worthwhile, because then you're not going to even really manage that joint venture relationship as much as it is your staff who's going to take care of most of it.
Sure. Okay. All right. So I have a question here about, well, a specific question. A couple specific questions, but what's the best way for a millennial with $75,000 in savings to get started in real estate? Or what's a tip, strategy you could offer them?
I would probably go with the house hack setup. Like, that's how I got started. I was fresh out of university, like not a lot of money in my pocket, and just starting work. And I mean, one of the things that I like to share with people is I did my own renovations to a degree, just so that I could, again, learn how the things get done. I also hired people to help where necessary, right? There's so much value in having people that know what they're doing. Like, if you're spending money, but nothing's getting done, what's the point of that, right? So you want to make sure that the money's being applied to its best ability. And if that means hiring somebody, hire somebody. You don't have to do it all yourself. With 75,000, I mean, you can do like the 5% down type of thing, right? So you're leveraging as much as you can. It's nice to have a little bit more equity and stuff, but ultimately, if that's the cost of entry and you got to have CMHC insurance, just pay it, right? Like, you should be fine. So that's the first approach, is that house hack, where you can bring in some revenue from extra rooms or extra units. And I think a couple of us got started that way.
Yeah. And one of the nice things about house hack is, well, two advantages in that case. One is usually a person's highest living expense is their housing. So if you're able to house hack, which is basically live in part of the home, rent out the other part, whether that's living in a duplex or triplex and renting out the other 2 units, or living in a room and renting out other rooms, you're keeping your housing costs down. So instead of spending $2,000 a month on housing, you're spending nothing or $500. So you're able to save so much more and accelerate your portfolio. And the other advantage is, I think it's only for owner occupants that you can put 5% down. I think it's only if you're going to live there that you can put 5% down. So that might allow you to buy a wider range of property. Do you agree, Matt?
No, I think it goes up to like 10% once you're at like 4 units or something like that, but you can put less down if you're gonna live in it. So definitely, I recommend like doing like a multifamily unit scenario versus just bedrooms, just because from a financing perspective, if you say you go live in it, you manage to turn over a couple of tenants and you want to refinance, like, yeah, you can turn over rooms, but depending on the lender, they're not going to take into consideration how much you increase each bedroom by, but they'll consider how much you increase the rents into different units, and then you'd be able to refinance your money and go look for your next project there as well.
If I can add to that, I would also recommend, to Matt's point, like buying something where you do have that separate unit. My situation was different, but if you have the 75 and that can get you 2, 3, like buy as many units as you can, because you're going to do your first deal with like 5% or 10% down. You might as well buy as big as you can with that 75 grand. So like, don't just look for like the single family house, go as big as you can, depending on your market.
Okay. Another question in the same line. What about a middle-aged person? Can a middle-aged person with no money start to build a real estate portfolio?
Yeah, I think anyone with no money can start working towards a real estate portfolio. You just got to figure out what you're going to do to make that capital. At the end of the day, you're going to have to get capital. I think Natalie mentioned her story of how she was able to do a lot of that work and be able to get into that property through like a construction loan and things like that. But if you're going to say you're a middle-aged person who has like the shittiest credit and like you have, you know, like everything just in life has never worked out ever, like, unfortunately, I think most lenders and bankers are going to look at you and say like, okay, even I'm not going to back you on a construction loan because it absolutely makes no sense. Not to say that there isn't a private lender who's going to be out there willing to finance you at like 20% like crazy. But realistically, you don't want to do that for your first one because it's not going to go well. So realistically, if you're a middle-aged person with no experience with no money, ideally go look to work with somebody, whether as like a hands-on trades or just like, you know, volunteer time like Ian had done with Michael Walk and Welland, to get some of that experience of what you need to do for that property and start building some extra cash that way. Yeah, you should pretty much start trying to save as much money as possible so you can even have a small component, and then look to even potentially joint venture on a property. So if you can find a deal and it makes sense and you can basically break it down where it absolutely makes sense, you can then start selling your piece of the equity then, right? So say you have 100% of the property, you say, all right, look, I got this property under contract and hopefully you have money for the deposit, because as long as you can make the deposit, you're good. So now that you've tied it up, you start going and pitching it to a bunch of different people that you know that might want to invest in real estate, and you sell them in different stakes saying, hey, this is what the property is worth. So say you tied up the property for 400K, maybe you can get them to buy it at a 500K value because the market value is like 550 or 600, and start selling them for higher chunks so you're actually able to take a little bit of cash out from there, or maybe retain a small piece. So that way, maybe your first project that you own or first rental that you own, you maybe only own 10%, but it was none of your own money. So work through it that way. But again, if you're an experienced trade with no money going into it, I think you got a little bit more advantage in that you could probably be the working partner and have a little bit more ownership. But if you're just, you know, working a job and you have absolutely no savings, then you're gonna have to hustle your way to it.
Yeah. And we don't have, a lot of these questions are in a box. That's all the info we have, right? So for example, does this person have bad credit? Do they have good credit? We don't know all those details. And I would say even, when you're saying keeping a small amount of the deal, there's even people looking for a joint venture partner that will just get the mortgage qualification. They won't provide the capital, they won't do the renovation, but this might be an investor who has capital but just can't qualify at this time. Maybe they just left their job, they need to show 2 years of income before they can qualify. So they're looking for someone to just qualify for the loan. And again, don't jump in blindly. You're committing something even if they're providing a guarantee to you. But there's different ways that you can use credit instead of money, use time, labor, etc., instead of using money, like Mitt was saying, and keeping a little bit of a deal to get started. It helps so much to get your foot on the ladder. First property, you get your foot on the ladder, you get rents coming in, you're learning things. And then, you're able to refinance, you have equity in it, you can use that equity to show lenders, and it just helps you get that next step faster and faster and faster as you grow. So even 10% of a small house is a good start that'll let you get to the next step. Okay, another question kind of in the same vein, a little. I'm stuck in analysis paralysis, which is something we see often. I've saved a year's salary. How can I start? Should I try turnkey properties to get my feet wet?
Yeah, I would say if the numbers make sense, that could definitely be an option. With turnkey properties, there's less room for error when it comes to renovations, dealing with contractors, some of the other challenges we run in through when doing the BRRRR strategy, or a strategy that takes a little bit more experience. So if the numbers make sense and purchasing that turnkey property will still cash flow and you'll get a good return on your investment, I would go ahead and do it. That being said, you got to keep in mind that one investment could tie up a good chunk of your capital, and you won't be able to recycle it for a while, and you'll have to look at alternative solutions, maybe joint venturing going forward, et cetera, to fill that gap.
Okay.
And
anyone else on either the turnkey or the analysis paralysis?
Yeah, actually, funny enough, that's actually what I see with a lot of clients too that come to us when they buy their first time home or so. They're like, oh, I just put my down payment into this multi-unit and I'm pretty much just going to wait another 2 years before I buy my next property. Where it's, they could look for, private money or other things to really accelerate and grow their portfolio. So I would say, look at the, strategy that makes sense for where you want to end up going. Where it's like, do you want to work your job for another 2 years and then buy your next property, or do you want to own a couple of rentals so that you can maybe quit sooner and, be more full-time in real estate? You might not have that answer the first day that you're in it, but you'll probably know whether you want to buy more than one or not. So if that's the case, then, it's likely not going to be the turnkey strategy, but it could potentially be too. So just take a look at the numbers, run your numbers. If you have analysis process, just always just run all your numbers, but it ultimately comes down to just pull the trigger. You're gonna just have to take the step and do it, and just accept that at some point there's risk, right? There's risk, but it's calculated risk, and as long as you're not like, okay, YOLO, I saw this property on Realtor.ca, okay, I'm putting in a blind offer, like, okay, that doesn't make sense. But if you ran the numbers, and there's a bunch of Facebook groups and a bunch of organizations where there's other investors you can just chat with, and if they look at it and they're like, you know what, this makes sense, go on Bigger Pockets, run it through their calculators, or check with other investors, and if they think it's a decent investment too, then go ahead and just do it. Like, I've also got other people who are like, oh man, like, what happens if there's an issue with the toilet? I'm like, I don't know, call the plumber. Like, what do you think I'm going to do? Like, I'm not going to do anything different. Like, but all you end up doing, especially as you continue to grow your portfolio, is you just start accepting, like, all right, shit's going to happen, and I'm going to get a phone call about shit happening, and I'm going to have to either give money to deal with it, or I'm going to spend time dealing with it. And as long as you can accept, those are the kind of the two outcomes there. Like, outside of there being like a fire and then whatever, but get insurance for your property and you'll be fine. At least that way, you get paid out something there. So there isn't anything really, really catastrophic that's going to go wrong, unless you're like a slumlord and you're like harming people. Then like you deserve it. So don't do that.
Yeah. Okay. I know Piersant has to leave shortly. We're going to continue until 8 o'clock, but Piersant is going to jump off. What I thought I'd do now is I wanted to give everyone a chance, starting with Piersant, to just let our attendees, let people know, what services do you provide, or is there anything that you'd like to ask our attendees of? And we're going to send out a link of websites and contact info for all of the panelists tomorrow, so that any of the attendees can join up with you guys if they have anything. So is there anything that you'd like to tell people that you can do for them, or that you'd ask of our audience here?
Yeah, for sure, Luke. Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, like I had mentioned earlier, Mid and I are real estate accountants. We have a real estate firm where we work specifically with real estate investors, private lenders, mortgage investment corporations, etc. And we are investors ourselves, so we're able to analyze your portfolio not only from a tax efficient manner, but even consider strategic things or financing considerations when providing you with advice. I'm also a real estate agent based out of the GTA. We help clients find properties that in Toronto it's tough to cash flow, but towards that triplex conversion type of deal there. So I'd encourage you guys, if you have any questions or want to get in touch with me, you can reach me on my Instagram at @thepvrajan. And I think, Luke, you'll be able to include that in the
Yeah, if you want to drop that in the chat, Piersant, and then Aaron will send out everyone's contacts that they want to be reached at tomorrow.
Perfect. Awesome. All right, guys, I got to drop off, but thanks for having me. I hope the attendees got a lot of good value out of this, and yeah, hope to see some action being taken in the future.
Okay, and everyone else is staying on till 8.
Yep.
So I thought I'd give everyone else the chance right now before we finish. Well, we still have more questions, so if you guys just have a quick 30 seconds, anything else that you'd like to ask of our audience? There's nothing you want, Natalie? Free money? Contractors?
I was going to say, that's a great yeah, we have a platform, right? Yeah, so down in the Niagara region, if people are looking for deals, I've got my real estate license, so I'm helping some people this way. Focus exclusively on Niagara, so I'm not going all over, so don't call me for that. But I know my market, I know this area, and on the construction side too, we do take on projects, but in the same way that joint ventures, like I look for good, solid people. That's what we're looking for in clients too. We don't want the ones who are the nightmare clients. So if you think you're a nightmare, don't worry about it, find somebody else. But if you want to produce good properties and do them right, like Luke was saying, like you like to have nice properties, you attract good tenants, you get good rents, that's what we're in it for. We're not in it to have trash and junk that, you're just trying to get as much as you can out of somebody for as little as you can provide, right? Provide good value. This is a business and everybody's happy at the end of the day. So I'll include Instagram. It's the best place to reach me. or email. And if you just Google my name, you'll find some stuff too.
Okay, awesome.
I'm in the Ottawa area, and I'm a couple months away from getting my realtor's license. So if anybody wants anything, let me know. I also have I started this like consultation service through my website for like design and build or something like that. If people have questions, there's a fee, obviously, because I don't have a lot of time. So I am charging for my time, and I don't have a lot of available times either. But there are a few, I think Tuesday nights at 6:30 Eastern time or 7. I forget. So if anybody wants to chat, let me know. You can contact me through my Instagram or also through my website, and I'll put that in the website. Elise, yeah, thanks.
Awesome.
Awesome, Natalie. I want that 24 unit building. So yeah, guys, I'm Mitt. I'm partners with Pearson in the accounting practice. So if you guys have questions about accounting, yeah, feel free to shoot over. But outside of that, a lot of what we do is actually more like real estate advice to a lot of our clients when we review their portfolio. I'm also a mortgage agent. I'm predominantly focused on like large commercial building financing for most people, but also for people who are looking to like kind of grow their RSP, TFSA, and other like private funds. If they're looking to lend that out on like first, seconds on properties for investors, we're also helping do that. So feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. I also have a couple of posts or Instagram reels on private lending where you make money while you sleep. So look, if you haven't seen, you can go ahead and look at that and laugh.
All right. And also, yeah, and Mitt has been doing our accounting. Mitt's firm has been doing our corporate accounting for our business here. All right, so back to our regularly scheduled programming, back to our questions. And this one ties into where we were with the analysis paralysis a bit. But with the high property prices, everywhere's blown up, right? Are you lowering your expectations on ROI, cash flow, cash on cash return? I get stuck in analysis paralysis waiting for the numbers that investors were getting last year, but it's no longer possible. And I mean, I would love the numbers investors were getting in 2005, and 2006, and 2007, and 2010. I'd love those numbers, but I can only get today's numbers. So what do you guys think? How do you deal with that? Are you lowering your expectations, and how do you not get stuck looking at what people were getting before?
Yeah, I can kind of answer that, especially because we've been in like the larger multifamily space now for like a year and a half ish. I'm looking prior to that. Unit prices have gone up like crazy, right? And I'll let you know that when we were initially running numbers when we were buying buildings in London, we said, okay, for a 2-bedroom, we'll get like $1,350. But with our strategy, what we've been able to do is we've actually now rent out like 2 bedrooms for like $1,700, right? So rents have actually, like our cash on cash return actually exceeds what we had initially thought about. And what we're realizing is that, like, again, I think something that both Ian and Luke mentioned is like the quality of the product that you offer can demand that premium. Like, obviously we're not offering, well, I would say we're still offering like executive style, but we're not offering so executive style that it's out of reach for most people. In the markets that we're in, we're basically offering units where people, when they come to live in it, it looks like it's Toronto. So all of a sudden they're like, oh shit, in Toronto, it would cost me $3,400 to $3,500 for this place. And they're asking me $1,700 for this whole furnished unit. Like, holy heck, I'm going to pay for this because I'm going to go pay $1,400 for an unfurnished place that hasn't been renovated or touched in forever. Meanwhile, it literally looks like a high-end Toronto condo. So being able to provide, identify ways that you can increase the value is going to really allow you to be able to continue to justify the return. So again, one of the things that works out is that yes, prices did go up, but rents across the board in most markets have also increased to help support it. One thing I do in all my performance is like I don't really price in like appreciation outside of 2-3% in where like the Bank of Canada's like inflation rate targets are. And that mainly is because I look at appreciation as extra. Like the property should be able to like cash flow and debt service itself to make sense. Unless it's like an area like Toronto. But even in that sense, like we're not buying multifamily buildings there. If anything, I'm only looking at like say waterfront properties, and that's more or less because like I want to live there, or I think it'd be a really great like vacation rental that could be operated very long term. So from that perspective, yeah, you can always have that analysis process. Like we are paying unit prices now that we weren't paying like a year ago. We bought a number of buildings in Chatham, and a year ago I probably wouldn't have bought in Chatham. But the markets and the numbers all make sense. So for me, like it's really weird. Like I can kind of displace myself from the actual, like, look at the property and be like, oh, it was other things sold for 90K a year last year, and the cash flow was still there, and now you're gonna pay like 110 mil, like what the hell? And I'm like, no, my numbers still say that it's gonna be fine, and if anything, there isn't any like really large multi-res being built like at the pace to fill the demand that people have. So at the end of the day, sure, maybe if I were to look at purely on purchase price, yeah, like we're paying a lot more and it'd look like it's lower, but inherently a lot of the cash, or not the cash, the rents have also increased to like substantiate the ROI and the cash on cash returns. And I know a guy just commented here, John, about how do you turn tenants over. We usually ask them if they want to leave, and then otherwise we pay them money to leave. So it's called cash for keys.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could maybe expand on that question. For us, it's different, right? We're not buying houses, we're building, but the construction market this year is going to be absolutely insane, like crazy right now. If there's a vacant lot for sale, it's sold like right away, and it goes with bidding wars like everything else, really. But it's becoming increasingly hard to build, especially like the prices of material is going up. Like floor joists went up another 40% since the last lockdown. Now, of course, we're in lockdown again, so things are just going to get worse. And it's just hard. Like even the truss manufacturers right now, basically, if you're thinking of building this year, if you haven't ordered your trusses already, well, you're screwed. You're not building it until 2022, because the truss manufacturers are not taking any new orders, are already swamped. So we were supposed to build another fourplex, and we're just going to wait until next year. We're going to wait and see what happens. So right now we're just finishing the 2 fourplexes that we have on the go. We're like managing for someone else another fourplex. We're going to just build the foundation and the framing, and then we'll let them take over after that. But for us, it's just going to be a waiting game, because it's honestly just impossible for us to keep building right now. So yeah, it's a little maybe different in the construction side. Hoping things crash so we can maybe start doing a traditional BRRRR. But yeah, no, for this year, it's going to be a waiting game for sure.
It's a bit of a catch-22, because everything we currently own is worth more, and everything we want to buy costs more. So it's all right, but we'll deal with it. And the strategy adapt. So sometimes that means more units, or finding stuff that needs bigger renos, right? If something's really run down, you got to put a lot of money into it. That's okay. If the value on the end side or the finish side is higher, that's fine. It's about adapting, finding those little ways to be creative. So sometimes that comes with the experience for sure. And then sometimes it's just looking at so many deals and really feeling out like what can work and what can't. And that comes with time in the market.
Yeah. And you see also people's strategies change over time. And the type of investors and what they're investing in change over time. You see, I've seen investors, they buy a specific type of property in one area. Even back in the day, Don Campbell wrote a great book, Canadian Real Estate Investing in Canada, something, the ACRE system, Authentic Canadian Real Estate System. And, the examples in the book, you were buying a house, renting it out, maybe you rented the garage separately. And then a few years later, you could refinance and buy another house, and they all cash flowed, and it was wonderful. And you were probably buying them for $130,000. As those kind of strategies update, and similar to the BRRRR strategy, but those strategies update BRRRR. Now you're adding duplex basement apartments to make them duplexes. People are adding now third units, coach houses, things like that. It adapts, it evolves. So now purchase price, you can't just buy a house and rent it out. It doesn't make sense. But then maybe with 2 units, now maybe you can make it work with 3 units. So there's ways to make it work. And you do see some investors who get stuck in their way. So they go buy a bunch, they buy 5, 10 houses, they make it work this way. And then a few years pass and say, well, it doesn't work anymore. And they don't know what to buy. And they're happy with the properties they have, but they don't know what to do. And then these new investors come in with a new strategy and they make it work. as best prices go up. So there's always a strategy. There's always a way to make it work. In every market, I see people making cash flowing rentals work in Toronto, which is crazy to me because I couldn't do it, but some people make it work. So yeah, definitely different ways of making it work. Let me touch on a question here about financing wholesale deals. So someone here is asking, with wholesale deals, as long as we have the cash to pay the initial fees, assignment deposit and such, do we technically have until the actual closing date to secure the finances for the property? In the case we were using a lender financing and had a pre-approval. So I'd answer this as a wholesaler. I wouldn't, first of all, if the property's in rough shape, I would definitely not rely on an A lender because they may not lend in properties that are in really rough shape. So don't rely on them in the first place. Yes, you do technically have until closing to lock it up, but I would say when you're buying a rundown property from a wholesaler, plan on either needing the cash for the assignment fee in addition to your deposit, and or to close with a private lender who's going to be able to give you fast closing on a not so great condition property. You may just have to run those costs into you, but that's part of the BRRRR. You pay those costs for a short amount of time up front, you get the renovation done as quickly as you can, and then you can go to your traditional lender, your A or B lender, to get the long-term loan at the lower rate, but for the higher value because you've now renovated it and hopefully bought it at a good price and you've increased the value. So, and hopefully the new rents will make it make sense if you're holding that property. So question for the panel as well, and good for one of our last questions here. How do you know, or how will you know when it's time to retire from your 9-to-5 job?
For us, it was just making sure that the cash flow was able to replace our income. If we can have a positive cash flow that's equal to our 9-to-5 and that we know that it's going to keep coming in and that we can keep increasing, and that's just like cash flow, that's not counting equity and stuff. Equity is just gravy. If we can do that, then we're okay. So we'll be there soon actually for me to be able to leave too. But yeah, it's all about cash flow.
Yeah, I'll echo what Natalie said. I think me and Pierce are already there, but we have an accounting business. So for us, there's like a lot more responsibilities outside of, let's say, the money that's needed of clients and relationships that we have. So a lot of our clients also end up being JV partners, or we help advise them on a lot of things. So it's a lot of friendships there too. So for us, like if we were saying retirement and go to the beach, I was in Jamaica for like a month, like 2 months ago. I realized how fast I can get tired of the beach and go stir crazy too, and my mind likes to race. So even if I were to take like a semi-retirement, I think you'd still end up being active in some form or another, like whether it was me just managing the real estate portfolio, but even then, like as I said, I don't even deal with the tenants anymore. So really, I'm predominantly involved like in acquisition, oversight, and refinancing, and then after there, like I don't really know what happens, or I don't care to know. Like I choose not to know.
Okay, and Ian?
What I would say is it depends on if you want to leave, right? Like with Mitt running a company, Natalie in a job, I feel like I'm a hybrid of both. I've got a business that runs, I've got a job that works. I enjoy my job most days. There's days we hate real estate, right? There's like nightmare days, but it's if you decide that the cash flow is what you need to eliminate the job and you don't want to do your job, that's a perfect answer. If you want to keep your job and go in and hang out with your employees and your staff members or your colleagues, like that's okay too. Leaving a job isn't the absolute be all and end all. Like Mitt was saying, for a guy like myself too, like I'll take a day off, maybe a month or like 6 hours, right? And I'm perfectly fine with that because I enjoy being busy and the people that I work with are friends, they're colleagues, they're JVs or whatever. So it's enjoyable. But for most people, I think that answer is going to be, you got to replace the income to a certain degree. And then you also have to realize that once you quit your job, you're not going to make no money. You're going to have your cash flow and you're also going to be doing something else. You're probably going to be acquiring more deals. You can go and do some form of work, maybe in the field that you were doing before. You can start a small business. You're not going to go to zero or negative. So if you got that buffer of cash flow and you really hate your job, even if you're making 15 bucks an hour, you're going to make, 30 grand a year. And if you've got 20, 30 grand in passive income, there's 60 grand a year. And if you live pretty frugally, you can kind of do okay. Depends if you got a family and kids and responsibilities, but that's how I would look at it.
Yeah, like it totally depends on everyone. Everyone's situation is different. I know people who quit way before the cash flow covered the salary, but they figured that their time was better valued in the real estate business because they could scale it a lot quicker and they got to their goals a lot quicker. And then the job was, holding them back and they weren't happy and et cetera, et cetera. So it completely depends on their situation. If, like Ian said, it's probably more difficult if you have a family to support. If you're alone and you're young and you've got nothing to lose, hey, why not? You could probably quit and just get into it full time. It depends how ballsy you are, I guess. It depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, I think as you guys have said, it's not, even though we talk about retiring from a 9-to-5 job, it's not actually about retiring. I think the main focus is having the ability to not need your 9-to-5 job, to choose to stay in your 9-to-5 job, to go sit on the beach, which I don't think anyone's going to choose that, or to go and focus on your real estate, focus on, I think, doing what fulfills you the most. When you no longer need to work for money, you can either choose to pursue something that allows you, because you no longer need the day-to-day money to survive, you can choose something that could potentially provide way higher returns, or you could decide to look for the cure for cancer. I mean, you can, when you have control over your time and you're no longer going to a job, you have your own choice. And I think there's also an illusion that, I trained as a lawyer, I got called to the bar, I quit and went into real estate full time. It's not, I'm not working, I work probably more than I ever have before. So I kind of traded one job for working my ass off running my own business. And that's not retiring on the beach. But at the same time, would I have the ability to do that if I wanted to now? Yes, I think I would. So having that ability is a nice thing, and I can choose what I do with my time, and I can choose to take time off to spend with my daughter and my wife. I have that ability now, that control, where I wouldn't have, especially if I was working in a corporate law job. Okay, we're almost out of time here. Someone had a question here that I wanted to answer. Yeah, do the panelists think that downtown real estate, so we'll say downtown Toronto, downtown Ottawa, downtown big cities, downtown real estate will return in popularity after the pandemic is gone for good? That's assuming you think the pandemic will be gone for good. So what do you guys think? Do you think, I've seen rents drop. Like I said, we have a couple condos in Toronto. We re-rented one recently. Rents were way lower than they were, even a year ago. So do you guys think things are going to go back to normal in the cities? Is it going to get more intense real estate wise than it was, or is it just going to stay kind of less desirable?
I think there's been a pandemic before, right? The Spanish flu or whatever. And if you study that one, you kind of see that the big cities did empty out. People went in the countryside, but after a while, people forget and they do come back. It's just the amount of how long is it going to take? We have no idea. It's gonna it depends on how long this drags out, and but I do think it's gonna come back. It's just a question of time.
Yeah, I think it's going to come back too. I was in Toronto when they first opened back up last year. And at that time, I was me and Pierre Sant and a couple of our friends, Luke, Emma, we were all on the patios, and as much as people could come, they would, and things were full. So I think as much as, you can go and live out in the suburbs, unless you go to somebody's house, it's really hard to go out and do things. And you'll always have sort of the younger professionals drawing back downtown. I know a lot of the corporate finance places have actually had their staff actually return to and work from the office now as well. So as soon as those things open back up, those guys and girls will all be at the bars and restaurants, just making more people want to come hang out downtown.
I would imagine, I'm not from a big city nor lived in a big city when I studied university for some time, but I think people live in a larger city for employment, and that was the reason that people were drawn there. With the ability to work a little bit more remote, that will probably come back where people want to be in an office, right? My current day job, I'm in an office. I get to see my colleagues. I enjoy it. If I didn't get to see anybody and I had to work from home every day, it would probably drive me nuts over a certain period of time. But yeah, I think people do forget, right? People forget, and then they'll return to the cities. At the same time, I think that ripple effect of, you know, being in the GTA, a lot of people have moved out into the Golden Horseshoe, and I don't really hear a lot of people saying, like, I think more retirees are coming this way too in the Niagara region. There's definitely a lot of like families and young professionals still, but you don't hear a lot of people saying, when I retire, I want to go to Toronto. It's people, when I retire, I want to move outside, right? They've had their career there. So I think it's the young people will come into the city, they'll move out over time, and it's that inflow and outflow, but definitely it's going to recover.
Yeah, and I think as immigration picks back up, I think we're going to see people move back into the cities as well. So my opinion, I don't see the cities as being dead. I think, and I kind of alluded to this earlier with the not capped rent control. I think rents are going to go back up as they were, and we're going to see a big jump from where they went down to. They're going to jump up to relatively where they were before. But will that take, a year or 5? I couldn't tell you. We had another question that was, can you discuss opportunities in the self-storage market? Which is actually perfect timing because we're about to wrap up, and that gives me the opportunity to tell you about our next webinar, which is next Tuesday, May 11th at 6 p.m. So our next webinar, we have a lineup of guest speakers who are going to present their experience in the multifamily, industrial, and self-storage real estate market, and our own in-house commercial real estate expert, Bliss Realty's expert, Andre, is going to let you know what lenders are looking for to approve loans on commercial investments. And so, as always, we're going to have Q&As. That's not going to be a Q&A only focused panel. It's going to have presentations from the speakers, but that is going to be fully commercial focused. And as we're kind of hinting at, Bliss, we have expanded into commercial, multifamily, and light industrial opportunities. So that's something we're looking to both wholesale and close on ourselves. So definitely check that out if anyone's interested in investing in commercial properties or even just learning about the basics of it. We're going to be talking about that about a month from now. And we'll send out a link to register in the live chat. I see it was just there. And you'll get it on the same email where you're going to get the recording. For anyone who is curious, this whole presentation was recorded, this Q&A. You're going to get that in your email along with contact info for the speakers. If you guys want to drop your contact info again in there for anyone who missed it, so they can reach out to you if any questions, but everyone else will get it by email as well. So I just want to thank you all so much. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Anything else you guys want to leave with people for kind of how it is working a full-time job, getting in real estate, and any tips you can have for them to kind of wrap up?
Just go do it. Go buy that property. Just make it happen. Because your job's always going to be there. Your job's, if you were to die today, your job will find a replacement for you. So go buy that rental property because you're technically still the owner after you die.
Yeah. Like he said, don't stay stuck in I can't say that. And then analysis paralysis. Sorry. So yeah, don't stay stuck in that. Just, take the leap and figure it out. Even if you can make a mistake with the first property, figure it out. But I do want to add, the hustle is good. It's good that you guys are grinding and you're doing the full-time job and you're working weekends, but we've been there too. And you got to remember too, the reason why you're doing this probably is because you want to spend more time with family. You want to take that vacation more often, whatever. Just take the time to relax too, because you can crash, you can have a burnout or whatever if you do too much at once, and then that just kind of slows down the process of achieving your goals even more. And so just speaking from experience, actually, I have crashed before and it's not fun. It takes a couple months to get back into it. So I always say to people, the hustle is good, but for sure, carve out time for family and downtime, because it's just as important, if not, it's really important.
And before Ian, can everyone who's attending, can you guys drop your thoughts? What do you guys think of the panel? What did you think of our speakers? Do you have anything you want to say to them? Drop it in the chat. And Ian, what are your concluding remarks?
Wow, thanks for that. So I'm trying to think of the quote I heard, and I'll get the point across, but I won't have it perfectly down. It's basically, don't work towards retirement, work towards an ideal lifestyle. So we're all going to end up in the same place. We're 6 feet under, right? Like, just enjoy your days. Don't, I mean, I overanalyze properties, but I did it, right? You got to buy them some point. I analyze them to be safe, but run your numbers, talk it through with a couple of people, take that first step, get the first one done. And then while you're working your job, enjoy the day. So if you ultimately hate your job, then maybe it's time to do something about it. And really, that's your motivation to build a portfolio, right? So that you can exit, but work towards that ideal lifestyle and be grateful for what you do have.
Awesome. Okay, and from the feedback in the chat, it seems people really appreciated you guys being here. Nobody said we sucked, so that's great. Thank you all, really thank you all for coming, sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience. Doing this in addition to investing in real estate on the side and working a full-time job must be even harder to carve out time to be on a panel like this. So I appreciate you guys being here. And for everyone else, we'll see anyone who wants to be there at the next webinar on May 11th at 6 p.m. And thank you so much for attending, everyone.
Thank you for having us. It was nice to meet you guys.